Welcome to the Sunset Park podcast. I am your host, Rob Aguilar. Thank you very much for tuning in and joining us this evening. It means the world to me. On today's episode, we are joined by Alexa Aviles, who is running for city council to represent our district at the city level. Um, but before we get started, I would like to remind you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can go over to www.sunsetparkyoutube.com and subscribe and make sure you click on the notifications so that every time we go live, you'll be able to watch the videos. I also encourage you to comment on the live chat and we'll post the best comments onto the screen. Now, let's welcome Alexa to the podcast. Alexa, thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. It's very exciting.
Thank you. So we're going to, I guess, dig right in and talk about your work in the community and talk about how long you've been doing work in Sunset Park and in the district in general. So how long have you been here?
So I have been here for almost 20 years. I moved to Sunset Park because I fell in love with someone who grew up here in Red Hook. So he was a Sunset Park native. And so I moved here and we started our family. And so I have been here all that time and it's been wonderful.
Now, so you moved here about 20 years ago. Where did you move from?
Oh, that's a good question. So I was in a graduate program. So I was living in California for the time and then living in the Heights for a little while before that. But I'm a Brooklyn girl. So I was raised in East New York, Brooklyn. So I was ecstatic to come back to Brooklyn. I knew I would always come back to Brooklyn.
So how did you get your start in community work? Like when did that come about and how long have you been doing it?
So my start in community work, anywhere I landed my feet, I was involved in community. But here in Sunset Park, really my entry was when my daughters, I have two beautiful daughters, 11 and 14 years old. But when I had them in community, it just immediately spurred activity. And so ever since pre-K, I got involved in the schools. I started witnessing things that I wasn't really happy about. And it just really activated me in a really big way. And so my entry point was really through school and community work that way. And it just kept mushrooming over the years. It just kept growing and growing.
Now, when you were doing all that community work initially and you progressed through the years, was running for office always something that you had in your mind, or how did this come about, running for office? I mean, it's an important role. You're representing a community that's about 140,000 residents.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more when you count the other neighborhoods that are part of the district.
Yeah.
How does that come about? What prompted you to say, I want to run for city council?
It's a great question. Over the years, people have always asked me, would you run for office? Would you run for office? And, I was always really humbled by that. Public service is obviously something that is so important. And, but I thought I didn't have enough experience. I needed more and more and more. And, 20 plus years later, with tons of experience, the question still kept coming around. And finally I said, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to step in. I'm ready to take that next step to have a bigger impact for this community that I love so much. And so really it was a convergence of a lot of things happening at the same time. But I think, built over years of preparation and years of understanding and years of, building a family and really understanding all these things and how important and critical things are and how complicated life is. So it was really the convergence of experience, time, urgency, and feeling really prepared to step in.
And it's a very interesting time to be running for office. we're going through a historic pandemic
Yeah.
that, for obvious reasons, lack of leadership has put us in a place where we see how vulnerable uh, our city is, our state, our entire country, when you don't have the right leadership in place. And it's going to be very complex to, I guess, navigate through all the intricacies of local politics to get the right uh, bills or laws put into place that benefit the community. Um, and I guess Sunset is like very similar to other neighborhoods where we
Mhm.
have a very particular set of issues or problems that we need to take on. One
Yeah.
of them being uh, gentrification and aggressive development in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And you can't talk about Sunset Park without talking about that giant neighbor that we have right in the middle of our neighborhood,
Yeah.
Industry City.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts or what are your feelings about Industry City? Are they good or bad
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
Sunset Park and the entire district in general?
Yeah, yeah. So in the time that, I lived here, I've seen the drastic changes in the neighborhood. And I've seen it, I've worked citywide, and we've seen these changes really across almost every low to moderate income community across the city. Sadly, it hasn't been good, right? So, in terms of Industry City in particular, I have spent enormous amounts of time, like many residents in this neighborhood that truly love it, have spent hundreds of hours reviewing. I sit on the community board, the application, and debating the merits, and debating the needs, and really trying to get through and understand the potential benefits, but truly the impacts of Industry City. And what we've seen is in its current iteration, it's already had some significant impact in the neighborhood, right? And it has, while it will never acknowledge that it has fueled gentrification, right? And has fueled really this skyrocketing property values and skyrocketing rents. I've seen hundreds of families over the years struggle with the fact that they just couldn't afford to rent, and they ended up leaving to New Jersey and to Florida, and just other neighborhoods. Sadly, the development really has been kind of a city unto itself. And while I think some residents definitely enjoy being in that space, the impact of the actual development on the neighborhood proper has not been very positive. It has fueled pushing folks out of the neighborhood. It is not a welcoming place for people on fixed income, right? We don't have $16 to spend on a coffee. We have big families, right? And you're not going to buy a $5 piece of cake or a cookie. So in many ways, this development was not built for this community. This development was built to make profit, right? As it has done in other neighborhoods, right? To cater to a certain demographic of the neighborhood. So really, I mean, there hasn't been, yes, it has cleaned up Third Avenue. I know we hear the stories of the 70s and how Third Avenue was rough. But it wasn't built for this community. It was built for others. And sadly, if a rezoning happens without the acknowledgement of the impact that it already has on the neighborhood, that's only going to exacerbate the situation. And so we started not an honest conversation about the future impacts and what they want to do with that property. So
Yeah, one of the
that's
things
a
that I've
difficult situation.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed about that area in general, and you mentioned about beautifying Third Avenue, is that all around there, in the general area, like let's say 36th Street and Third, 35th and Third, there's really nice lighting underneath there. They have planters underneath the gowanus, and it's just there. If you move either further
Mhm.
south of Third Avenue underneath the gowanus, it doesn't look as pretty as it does right in front of Industry City. So I've always wondered, um, they I know that they advocated to have a lot of changes take place underneath the gowanus there. I'm a little wondering why they didn't advocate to have the rest of Third Avenue beautified the way they did it in that general area. But the concern is always, what can we do to police them, or to keep them in line, or to keep them in check, so that
Yeah.
the neighborhood isn't hurt any further
Yeah.
by the development that they're trying to do? Is there anything that can be done at the city council level that can,
Yeah.
pass some sort of legislation to make sure that the neighborhood is not hurt by
Yeah.
the changes that they want to bring along?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, your observation, right, that they just kind of fix the things in their footprint, right, that benefit their business is definitely a point of contention, right? They will only talk about the things in their footprint and not acknowledge the impact on the rest of the neighborhood, even when it's really clear, right? So for me, that's a derelict of responsibility, right? If we are neighbors, then we are going to care for one another, right? If this is a partnership, if we are offering additional benefit, additional land, additional rights to do things, then I think we have to have an honest conversation about, what does it truly mean to be in partnership, and recognize the power differentials there. So should it be improved further beyond on Third Avenue? Yes. Should it be pushed into the neighborhood? Yes. Should our businesses truly benefit from this giant development? Absolutely. Should our community benefit? Absolutely. Is it? Very little at best. So, I think your example really does scratch another part of the problem that we have here, right? Outside of all the data and the fact that the numbers don't add up and they're speculative, and they promise you everything under the sun and then have no evidence for it. It hasn't been a true partnership. It's been a lot of smoke and mirrors. Now, in terms of city council and how to deal with developments of this sort, I mean, honestly, the big thing that needs to be changed is how we deal with land use and the kinds of economic development deals that we allow to happen in the neighborhood, right? We should be putting forward the vision and determining the criteria, right, that we want developers to abide by, right? Whether it's living wage jobs, whether it's real local hire, right? We should set the framework and then say, if you want to come to this community and you want to extract wealth, because that's what it does, it extracts wealth from the people that live here, then you're going to have to be a partner. And it's going to require you to meet certain things. I think that's going to require some law changes, right? It's going to require a culture shift, right? Our city's driven by real estate. It's not driven by the needs of the people, right? It's not centered in the needs of our kids. We see this playing out all over the place. And so, the real opportunity that we have here, not only in the district, but citywide, is with this huge change that we're going to have next year, is for this whole cadre of new elected officials to come in and say, you know what, there were some good things of old that we need to preserve, but there are some things that we know don't work, and they particularly don't work for our communities. And we're going to have to be really bold and visionary and try some new things. We may fail a little bit, but you know what? For our communities, we have to take risks, because we have suffered for too long. We've suffered inequity for too long. Sorry, I'm getting all excited.
So do you think putting mandates in place with regards to land use is one way to, for example, slow down industry cities' aggressive build out of luxury hotels, luxury retail? And will that also, you think, help slow down gentrification?
So it'll definitely, I think, mandates, right? Regulatory frameworks were the ones we have were developed for developers, right? It gives them the ability to basically not to do what they want and not really be held accountable. So we need to scrap that, do something new, right? Something that does actually have some accountability measures in, and that really provides some real guidance for the community. So I'm all for creating frameworks, right, of accountability. the stopping gentrification, right? This is part of it. Gentrification is fueled by, by the market, by markets. And so we need to make sure we secure our long-term residents, right? If you can't afford to live in a neighborhood, you get displaced. And so we need to figure out as many mechanisms as we can to secure the small homeowners, right? Sunset Park, in a big portion of the district are small homeowners, intergenerational homes, when you can actually buy homes, when working class folks could buy a home. If we don't stabilize that, it's, the market is just way out of whack and too out of control. And so we need to find mechanisms to put in place to slow it down. Can we stop it? I don't know. I would like to stop it if we could, but I really don't know if we could.
Yeah, one of the arguments that I hear for people who are, I guess, kind of pro gentrification, and I hear it surprisingly from, or maybe not surprisingly, from existing homeowners that you just mentioned, where they're like, well, all these changes and Industry City being here and gentrification are contributing to the value of my property going up. Yeah. So it can't be bad. It's got to be good because I bought a house, and I hear this a lot from people who, like you said, purchased homes in the 80s, 70s, where they were like, I paid $90,000 for my brownstone, and I can sell it for $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Right. So those folks are like, yeah, this is great. I love it. What do we say to those guys that?
Yeah. Listen, I think when you're looking at your personal profit margin, like, yay, right? I just, I beg our neighbors, our friends to take a step back and say, you can still have significant profit and yet still also hold space for people that can't afford it, right? For people that can't buy in this kind of market. And really try to tap into, remember what it was like to work really hard and try to buy into something. We've got to make space for all of us. I mean, that's what makes New York City amazing. That's what makes Sunset Park so amazing. It's like the mix of people, and we're all grinding, and we have families, and it's that diversity that in all its forms that makes New York City so such a dynamic city. And so I would say, I feel you, I hear you, and I know this is beneficial for your family and your ability to build wealth, but we gotta spread the wealth, right? And we've got to create space for all our neighbors, because if not, a whole bunch of us are not going to be here. And what kind of community would this be? And just really tap into that humanity of folks. And I think I've had that conversation with a lot of homeowners, and they start to see how hard it is for a family of 4 or 5 who's working 2 jobs, barely paying the rent. And it's like, they want to go to Industry City too, but they can't afford the cookies. Like,
right.
It's the worst thing in the world is to tell your child no, right? When they're like, give you the perfect little face, and you're like, claro que sí. You want to get them what they want and what they need, because that's what you feel as a parent. But, I think we all have to make some sacrifices to make space for each other, because that's the kind of community that, we've lived in, and I continue to hope we aspire to continue to live in.
Yeah, I mean, even people who are doing really well find it a little exaggerated to pay $18 for an avocado toast, which is like, I actually did go to that avocado place once, and I was like not impressed at all. Like, they had a guacamole, and I was like, this is terrible, and it's $20, and it's not even a pint. Yeah, and I could get so much better guacamole on Fifth Avenue for like, a fraction of the cost. So that was a big turnoff too.
I mean, yeah, totally. Like, why would I live between 4th and 5th. Why would I go to 3rd Avenue when I got café con leche up the block for like $1.50?
Right. Or real tacos. Like, there's a taco place there that's, it's it's terrible, and it's like $5 a taco, and I could go to Tacos Bronco and get a taco for $1.50.
Yeah, yeah.
So another big issue that has always been kind of controversial in the neighborhood is the relationship between the community and the NYPD or a local
Mhm,
precinct.
mhm.
What do you what comes to mind when you think of the phrase that people are using now when they take to the streets, defund the NYPD?
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that movement?
This phrase defund, while new, is actually quite old, right? We've had activists and leaders working for decades around reducing police systems, reducing systems of prisons and jails, and systems that actually harm poor folks. So this is an old term, right? In some circles, it was justice reinvestment, right? How do you take these bloated systems, the militarization, right? If you think it at the federal level, we have a huge Pentagon budget, defense budget that is enormous. The Pentagon can't even like pass a financial audit. Um, and that translates locally. So we have these same, NYPD prison systems that are really bloated. And so this idea of moving resources from places that in fact may harm or are not effective, right? Or have grown out of control. So the argument here is that the NYPD is dealing with things they should not be dealing with that are far from public safety, like homeless outreach, like substance abuse, like being in places they shouldn't be when they should be like actually crime fighting. So it's grown over the years and it's gotten out of control. So I'm absolutely for investing in the systems and the services that we need, right? We need to max out and lean into education, right? We need to max out and lean into things that are the health, our public health, right? We see a growing concern around drugs and substance abuse. We can't arrest our way out of substance abuse. We need, programs that actually work and touch people and help them move out of poverty and the things that hold them down. So the movement really is about investing in things that are really important to to all our families, to our quality of life. And if the NYPD is the place where we have to remove some of that resource from, because they should be focused more on public safety and not on all these other things that they've grown to do, then that's exactly the way we need to go. Um,
So you would support taking money away from the NYPD and
No,
putting
I
it
mean,
elsewhere?
it has a $6 billion budget. So we're not talking about zeroing out NYPD. We're not talking about, like shrinking it to one person. We're talking about right sizing, right? How is it that the services that, like, I was actually talking to a police officer the other day, and he was suggesting to community members that, we had to arrest someone who was fighting addiction for them to actually get connected to a drug program. That's problematic. You know how much money we waste to have to arrest, if they even make it through the arrest, right? The violence of the arrest, to put them in a holding cell, to get them arraignment. You know how much money we're wasting through all those processes for them to get service that way? It doesn't make any sense. We've really kind of lost our way in many respects. And I think it's this pandemic and the fact that our budget is such in a difficult shape, I think is really going to make us step back and ask the hard questions. Like, does this program work? Does this spending make any sense? Like, why are we spending contracts that are just wasteful and sitting around? And that applies to the NYPD and to jail systems and prison systems and other systems that have gotten way out of control and are not actually enhancing public safety.
Yeah, from a marketing standpoint, if you will, the phrase defund the police or
Oh,
defund the NYPD scares some people.
absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. I
but
mean, I was our families, many of our families have been victims of crime, right? And we know what it is to be afraid and to, survivors of crime, right? And to call the police. And at the same time, we also know what it is to fear the police. And so, we sit with this in complexity, right? And so we have to, that phrase is sadly is not doing us a lot of justice, because it's doesn't hit where we need it to hit, honestly.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be a better way of allocating funds, because like what you touched on before, $6 billion, right? I was looking at some figures a while back, and they get more money than schools, hospitals, healthcare services combined.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's insane, and our priorities as a society, or as on the part of government,
Yeah.
their priorities have changed. It's shifted. It's not where it should be.
Yeah.
I feel,
Yeah.
and but
And, there hasn't been a lot of light on that. I think a lot of people don't realize how bloated that system has become, right? I think, it's like, I think when you really start to peel it back and you see, and then when you look at $6 billion and you look at the outcome, you're like, oh, it doesn't match. Something's wrong with it. We can do better. That's our money, and it should be supporting our families.
okay. So there is a question that came in from a Facebook user, and they're asking about the community board, and they want to know if the community board can become a vehicle through which the community can get directly involved in governing Sunset. Is that something realistic? Because there's a lot of people, and I've heard this, where a lot of people from Sunset Park, a lot of Sunset Parkers have lost faith, let's say, in the community board.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
what do you say to people that criticize the
Yeah.
community board as not being effective or not being representative of what
Mhm.
CB7 really needs and the people of CB7?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is to acknowledge that, community boards are challenging, right? They were set up, first of all, with a really big mandate with no real resources. And some have not been well managed, and others have maybe been better managed. And it really is, in some ways, the structure is archaic, but it is an entry point, right? And I mean, our community board now really, I can't speak to the community board 20 years ago, but our community board now has really a lot of dedicated people. And it's a struggle, right? It's a struggle without resources to do the things that you want to do for the community. But it is a wonderful entry point, right? To get a bird's eye view of everything that's happening in the neighborhood. I know what it's like to engage locally with specific organizations or through the schools. But the community board is kind of district wide. And so you do get the purview of what's happening with sanitation and what's happening with, land use and crime and education. It's a wonderful way to get an overview, but we have a lot of work to do on the community board, to make it representative, to make it inclusive, to make it accessible to people. I think we have been trying to do that work, and we're not there yet. But I would encourage anyone who's interested in coming, please do so. If you want to, talk to an individual board member to figure out what we're talking about, absolutely. I think we all need a little guidance and hand-holding when we step into these kind of spaces. But I think they're worthwhile. I think we have some work to do on them.
So would you say you being part of the community board gave you a bird's eye view of the issues that are affecting the neighborhood?
Yeah, in some ways, right? So, I mean, as a resident, right, like when your trash is not getting picked up, and when things are just not working on a daily basis, right? So in some ways, it was maybe validating, and also understanding that different parts of the neighborhood also have different impacts. And so it's important to understand that, maybe, further south, the issue that folks are confronting there are a little different, right? Or the landmarking that was happening, in in parts of Sunset. So it does give you kind of a bird's eye view, and also you get to meet residents from all over with different points of view. It's not easy. We don't always agree. But we do understand that we have love of community, and we are trying our best effort to make decisions that are, I guess with best intent, that are going to be good for the neighborhood.
So having that bird's eye view, I'm sure gave you a really in-depth idea of what is happening in the neighborhood and what the neighborhood needs. Of all the issues that you've worked on, whether it be in community work or with the community board,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to become our next council member, what issue do you think deserves top priority, that when you show up on that first day to the office as our council member, what is that issue that you say needs to be tackled on day one?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask the question. It's so hard. I have so many ideas of things to do. I think the first day really is going to be assessing. Well, I'm going to come in with some clear plans, but I think building a strong team made up of hopefully community members, connectivity, claiming space. I mean, COVID has really shifted things quite significantly. But I think we have to come out the gate really fighting hard around budget equity issues. Our community has been under-resourced systematically for years. And so we need to fight for our fair share. We need to fight for the resources that we deserve so that we can get the services that our community needs and deserves to have, quite frankly. So I will say absolutely budget, throwing down on the budget, getting the money, and connecting our community across. I mean, that's why I spent a lot of time like working with different parts of the community. And, in a school, you're pulling from all over the neighborhood. And so really like enhancing that connectivity and building the coalition across the community, because that's the way we're going to win, is building our collective strength. And so those are, I cheated. Those are two things that I'm gonna focus on.
So Alexa, why should we vote for you? Why are you the most qualified person running this cycle?
Well, for number one, I think I have been here for 20 plus years, and I just have honest, true love for this neighborhood and true love for people. I think people have reflected that when I've worked with them, and they really do see that I care. This is not a political, ladder. It's not a power grab. This comes from deep love and respect of community, and really wanting to make a difference and make an impact. I have enormous experience in the nonprofit world and building coalitions and working across tons of different issue areas, everything from reproductive rights for women and gender justice to government transparency and data systems to all these big issues, funding coalitions and work to pass laws. So I have a ton of policy expertise and just real commitment and love. And you can't do this without a lot of hope and experience and understanding and fire. So I'm here to win, and I'm here to make a difference for our community and go down trying. So I think for all those reasons, I am a decision maker. I'm a mama, so I can multitask. I think to give it our all.
Great. Now we actually have a really nice comment from Susan Johnson on Facebook, and I don't know if you can read it on there. She says that you were a PTA president at 172. when her grandkids were going there, and that you did some great things raising money and helping the school children with a lot of things that they needed.
Oh,
So, Susan,
so
thank you very much for that
thank
comment.
you, Susan. And my greatest joy is that so many of the kids that I actually work with, the young person that beat you to the podcast was a young person who had graduated many years ago and sent me an email and was like, "Can you be on my podcast? You
That's awesome.
you were so wonderful to me and my family." And I couldn't remember her, and then I did. And so touched. All my PS 172 babies are now like high school and college age, and they're all coming to work on the campaign. So prepárate.
Very nice. And there's some other people who are Angelina Sintron saying presente.
All right,
And,
Angie.
and we have Leticia Peguero, who's
All these
also.
Sunset Parkers represent.
And so it's time to put you on the spot. And so this is something actually I've been asking all the other candidates who are running. If you weren't running, Alexa, who of your opponents would you support?
So I would first go to them and say, you should really talk to Alexa about running. Oh, Dios mío, you asked this question. Well, listen, we've all probably said the same thing. We are a lucky community to have so many incredible people here. So I think we have some strong choices, and obviously we have. Y'all don't, well, some of you know, but we have ranked choice voting next year, which means that you can rank in order of preference. So it's not just voting for one person. You can actually vote for, I think, up to 5. So I would say, of course, vote for me, Alexa Aviles, as your first top choice. And then, come close to the second and third choices. So I can't pick. That's for the voters to do.
Yeah, and it's a difficult choice in general, I guess, for everyone.
It is.
Because there's the people that have announced that they're running are all great people, including yourself, who have a genuine love for the community and want the best for the district. And as we get closer to the election, I know there's still a long way to go.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you back and talk again about issues and about the plans and how you want to tackle on the office of council member. But I want to thank you for being here this evening. I think the viewers got a really nice feel of what you stand for, what you believe in, and we'd love to have you back again in the very near future.
Well, Rob, thank you so much again for inviting me. And, this is an awesome podcast dedicated to our community. You've had wonderful issues and forums. And so thank you for the opportunity. And everyone, come check out my website, Alexa for Council. Be involved, and please, the census, we need to get involved. Everyone, make sure you do your census and tell 5 to 10 people how important it is. We have till September 30th to count. And this means money. This means money for our schools, for our roads, for our hospitals. Please do the census.
Great. Thank you very much, Alexa.
I have to stick that in there, Rob. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in.
Awesome. Thank you.
We will be back next week with another guest. So you make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook at Sunset Park Podcast. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Good night.
Good night.